And sometimes you're going to work with guys you'd rather not work with, but at the end of the day, you always go to the ring to protect the person you're in the ring with. Your life is in their hands and vice versa.
He was the next big thing. That is what fans kept hearing again and again about wrestler after wrestler over the years. A new face would walk through the curtain. The crowd would roar. The announcers would talk about a bright future. And then, sometimes within months, that future would quietly disappear. Steve Austin has talked about this pattern many times on his own shows. He believes that getting a push in WWE is never the hardest part of the job. Staying at the top is the hardest part. Being big and looking strong is never enough on its own. A wrestler also needs to read the crowd in real time. A wrestler needs to stay safe in the ring so other performers trust him. A wrestler needs to change and grow as the audience changes around him. And a wrestler needs to survive the politics that happen backstage, far away from the cameras, where careers can rise or fall without a single televised match. Fans have watched this happen so many times that it almost feels like an unwritten rule of the business. A new star gets built up with confetti, fireworks, and bold promises. Everyone expects big things from him. Then something goes wrong, and the whole plan quietly falls apart. Sometimes it is an injury that arrives at the worst possible moment. Sometimes it is a booking decision made by the people running the show. Sometimes the fans themselves simply stop caring, no matter how hard the company tries to convince them otherwise. Whatever the reason, the result usually looks the same from the outside. A wrestler who once seemed unstoppable ends up forgotten, pushed to the side, or gone from the company completely. These stories are not just random bad luck scattered across different decades. When you look closely, patterns start to appear again and again. A hero gets forced onto fans who wanted someone else standing in that spot. A powerful body gets pushed into the main event before the wrestler is truly ready to lead an entire show on his own. A performer gets hurt at the exact moment his push needed him healthy. A backstage disagreement quietly ends a career that once looked completely unstoppable. Every single collapse teaches something important about how WWE really works underneath the surface, far away from what fans see on their screens each week. 10 stories stand out above all the rest. 10 wrestlers who were given every reason to believe they were about to become legends of the business. 10 pushes that started with genuine excitement and ended in real disappointment. Each one is different in its own way, yet each one proves the exact same point. Making it to the top of WWE is difficult. Staying there is even harder, and history has proven that difference again and again. None of these stories are being told to laugh at anyone or to mock a wrestler for failing. Every single name on this list took real physical risks, traveled hundreds of nights a year, and gave everything they had to a company that put enormous faith in them at one point or another. The point of looking closely at these 10 collapses is not to place blame on any one person. It is to understand the actual forces at work inside a business that looks simple from the outside, but is actually built from a tangled mix of promoter decisions, crowd psychology, physical risk, and backstage relationships. Once you understand those forces, every one of these stories starts to make a lot more sense, and the pattern connecting them becomes impossible to ignore. These 10 wrestlers will not be presented as a strict ranking from worst to best, or biggest to smallest. Instead, they are arranged so that each story naturally connects into the next one, showing how similar causes of failure echo across very different eras of the company. A story about a forced hero gimmick leads naturally into another story about a forced monster gimmick. A story about a devastating injury leads naturally into another story built around backstage safety concerns. By the time all 10 stories have been told, one continuous picture will have formed, showing exactly how fragile a main event push can be, no matter how strong it looks on the surface at the very beginning. The first group of stories on this list share a common root cause, one that shows up again whenever a company tries to force a character onto fans, rather than letting that character earn its place naturally. When promotional machinery pushes a performer without real organic buy-in from the audience, friction between the crowd and the character builds up quickly. High promotional spending gets met with apathy or sometimes outright hostility, and management is eventually forced to pull that performer back down into lower card roles, comedic gimmicks, or tag teams, no matter how much money had already been invested in building him up. The first 4 stories on this list all trace back to that same basic mismatch between what a promoter wanted and what a crowd was actually willing to accept. Number 10 is Lex Luger. In the summer of 1993, Hulk Hogan had just left WWE, and the company suddenly needed a new all-American hero to fill that enormous gap he left behind. Lex Luger had been wrestling as a cocky, self-obsessed character called the Narcissist, but WWE decided to completely repackage him from the ground up. He became the ultimate patriotic hero almost overnight, and the push behind him was absolutely massive. On the 4th of July in 1993, Luger arrived on the deck of the battleship USS Intrepid by helicopter and body-slammed the villain Yokozuna in front of a huge, cheering crowd. After that unforgettable moment, WWE sent him on a cross-country tour called the Lex Express, driving him from city to city so fans everywhere could see their new hero standing right in front of them. Everything about the plan looked absolutely perfect on paper. The bus tour, the patriotic gimmick, the giant helicopter entrance, and the dramatic body slam. All of it pointed toward one single moment, a massive championship win at SummerSlam in 1993. But when that moment finally arrived, Luger only managed to beat Yokozuna by countout, not by pinfall. He never actually became WWE champion. Instead of a title win, fans watched him celebrate with confetti and a locker room celebration for a match he had not truly won at all. That single moment stuck to him for the rest of his run. People started calling him a choker, someone who could not finish the job when it mattered most. On top of that painful label, fans had already decided that Bret Hart, not Luger, was the true star they wanted to see standing on top of the company. Once that choker label attached itself to Luger, his push never truly recovered again. By 1994, he had been moved down the card into a tag team with Davey Boy Smith, known together as the Allied Powers. Instead of remaining the top star in the promotion, he was now sharing the spotlight in a mid-card team with someone else. By late 1995, Luger had left WWE entirely for World Championship Wrestling, chasing a fresh start somewhere new. A wrestler who once flew in by helicopter to body slam a giant villain in front of a cheering nation ended up leaving the company only 2 years later. Steve Austin's lesson holds especially true here. Being pushed as a hero is easy. Staying on top as that hero is incredibly difficult, especially once the crowd has already chosen someone else to believe in with all their heart. Looking back, the entire Lex Luger situation shows what happens when a company tries to manufacture a hero from the top down, instead of letting one rise up naturally from the crowd's own reaction. The helicopter, the bus tour, and the patriotic music were all real efforts, and WWE truly did spend enormous resources trying to make Luger into the next Hulk Hogan. But none of that spending could force fans to feel something they simply did not feel in their hearts. Bret Hart had already earned that trust through years of matches, while Luger was being handed the position from above. That mismatch between promotion and genuine belief became the true story behind his fall, more than any single count-out finish ever could have been on its own. Number 9 is Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn had already found real success as part of D-Generation X, and as one half of the New Age Outlaws tag team, one of the most popular acts in the entire company. In 1999, WWE decided it was finally time to give him a singles push of his own, and he won the King of the Ring tournament that same year to kick it off. He was repackaged with a bold new name, Mr. Ass, and management sincerely hoped he could grow into a genuine singles main event threat, someone who could stand across the ring from stars like The Rock and Steve Austin himself. The problem became painfully clear very quickly once the spotlight shifted onto him alone. Gunn had thrived as part of a team, where the pressure of carrying a promo segment was always shared between two performers. On his own, without a partner beside him, his unscripted talking ability and solo charisma simply were not strong enough for the demands of main event television. When WWE placed him in a high-profile program against The Rock leading into SummerSlam 1999, Gunn was completely outmatched on the microphone night after night. Even top stars like Austin were reluctant to work closely with a performer who had not truly earned that level of main event heat entirely on his own merit. The turning point came at SummerSlam 1999, when Gunn suffered a decisive loss to The Rock in a Kiss My Ass match. That loss ended his singles push almost overnight, and WWE quickly moved him back into the tag team division, where he had always felt most comfortable performing. Billy Gunn's story shows how quickly a push can end when the talking side of the business exposes a weakness that the physical side of wrestling had been quietly hiding all along. He had the look, and he certainly had the tag team pedigree behind him, but without strong solo promo skills, the main event door closed almost as fast as it had originally opened for him. It is worth remembering that Gunn had actually built genuine popularity as part of the New Age Outlaws, and by some measures during that period, he was drawing reactions close to major stars like Triple H. That made his solo push feel logical on the surface, since the crowd clearly liked him already. But there is a real difference between being loved as part of a tag team, where a partner can carry the heavier promo work, and being being trusted to headline a program entirely alone. When that difference was exposed against a performer as gifted on the microphone as The Rock, the gap became impossible for WWE to ignore, and the tag team division suddenly looked like the safest and smartest home for him again. Number 8 is Lord Tensai. Before he was ever known as Lord Tensai, Matt Bloom had already proven himself as a dominant force in New Japan Pro Wrestling, wrestling there under the name Giant Bernard. When WWE re-signed him in 2012, they introduced him back home as Lord Tensai, an unstoppable monster wrapped in mysterious, Orientalist vignettes designed to make him look like an ancient and genuinely dangerous force. WWE gave him an immediate main event push right from the start, and he scored clean pinfall victories over two of the biggest stars in the entire company, John Cena and CM Punk. On paper, that kind of push should have worked without any trouble at all. Clean wins over Cena and Punk are usually reserved only for a wrestler management truly believes in at the highest level, but the modern WWE crowd did not accept the character at all, no matter how the presentation was framed. Instead of buying into Lord Tensai as a fearsome new monster from across the world, fans sitting in the arena began chanting Albert, his old WWE ring name from years earlier in his career. That chant was a direct and public rejection of the entire repackaging effort. Within just a few short months, his main event framing had completely collapsed under the weight of that rejection. WWE pivoted him into a comedic tag team called Tons of Funk, a world away from the serious monster character he had originally debuted as that year. Eventually, he moved into a backstage training role rather than remaining an on-screen performer at all. Lord Tensai's fall shows exactly what happens when a promoter tries to force an old-fashioned monster gimmick onto a modern audience that no longer buys into it the way older crowds once did. No amount of clean wins over top stars can save a character the crowd has already firmly decided to reject in their own minds. What makes this story especially striking is how strong Matt Bloom's credentials genuinely were before he ever set foot in a WWE ring as Lord Tensai. His run as Giant Bernard in New Japan Pro Wrestling had already proven he could dominate as a monster heel in a completely different wrestling culture. WWE clearly believed that success would translate directly, which is exactly why he was given wins over Cena and Punk so quickly after arriving. Instead, the Albert chants revealed something important about modern crowds, namely that they often remember a performer's entire history, and no fresh coat of paint or mysterious vignette can fully erase that memory once it surfaces during a live broadcast. Number 7 is Vladimir Kozlov. In 2008, WWE introduced Vladimir Kozlov on SmackDown as an unstoppable Russian Sambo powerhouse, a wrestler seemingly built to dominate anyone placed in front of him. He was booked with rapid squash victories over opponent after opponent, steadily building the idea that he was a genuine monster who simply could not be stopped by anyone on the roster. He was even given a clean win over The Undertaker, one of the most respected performers in company history, and he earned a spot in the WWE Championship match at Survivor Series 2008 as a direct result of that momentum. Despite all of that early momentum, Kozlov's push began to fall apart because of two closely connected problems. His mobility inside the ring was noticeably restricted, which limited the kind of matches he could realistically perform, and he struggled badly to build a genuine vocal connection with the live crowd watching him each week. Without strong ring movement or real crowd interaction, the excitement surrounding him faded away rather quickly. Fans grew apathetic instead of invested in his character. WWE management noticed the shift happening in real time and pulled him from top-tier storylines soon afterward. Instead of remaining a serious championship contender, Kozlov was repackaged as a comedic sidekick working alongside Santino Marella, a completely different role from the unstoppable monster he had been introduced as only months earlier. Kozlov's story echoes Lord Tensai's story in an important way worth remembering. Winning matches on television is never quite the same as connecting with the people actually watching those matches at home and in the arena. Once that connection fails to form properly, even a wrestler with wins over legends like The Undertaker can slide out of the main event picture very quickly indeed. The speed of Kozlov's fall is part of what makes his case so instructive. In a matter of months, he went from squashing opponents and beating The Undertaker cleanly to standing in a WWE Championship match, only to be repackaged into a comedy role soon afterward. That whiplash shows just how quickly WWE management is willing to change direction once a push stops generating genuine excitement. Booking wins on paper can only carry a performer so far. Without the ability to move fluidly in the ring or to build a bond with the crowd through his presence alone, Kozlov's ceiling was reached almost as quickly as it had been built. The next group of stories moves away from crowd rejection and into a different, more physical kind of danger. While creative booking mistakes can stall a push, physical liabilities and locker room safety concerns can trigger something even more abrupt, a political veto handed down directly by established main event talent. When a rising performer becomes known for unsafe or unpredictable work inside the ring, the wrestlers standing across from him hold real power to slow his career down, because their own health and their own livelihoods are on the line every single night. The next three stories all trace back to this same physical and political danger, showing how quickly injuries and safety concerns can undo years of promotional planning. Number 6 is Ahmed Johnson. In 1996, Ahmed Johnson stood out as one of the most explosive physical powerhouses WWE had ever presented to its audience. He captured the Intercontinental Championship at King of the Ring 1996, and management positioned him as a future World Heavyweight Champion, a foundational pillar of the company's entire new generation era at that time. Everything about his size, his athleticism, and his intensity suggested a long and successful run near the top of the card for years to come. But Johnson's body simply could not keep up with the enormous plans WWE had for him. He suffered severe and recurring injuries, including kidney damage and painful muscle tears, injuries serious enough to threaten far more than just his wrestling career alone. On top of the physical damage piling up, there was growing discontent inside the locker room about his unsafe execution inside the ring during matches. As his injuries kept interrupting storylines that management had carefully built around him, their confidence in his physical reliability slowly eroded week after week. By the time he left WWE in 1998, both his star power and his physical conditioning had completely broken down beyond repair. Ahmed Johnson's fall is a stark reminder that raw physical talent can only carry a push so far before reality catches up. When a wrestler's body cannot survive the grinding schedule, and when safety concerns build up steadily in the locker room, even a former Intercontinental Champion with genuine main event size can see his entire opportunity slip away for good. Johnson's case sits at the very center of a pattern that shows up across several stories on this list, where physical health and locker room trust are tied tightly together. Number 5 is Mr. Kennedy. Ken Anderson, known to fans everywhere as Mr. Kennedy, looked like one of WWE's brightest prospects back in 2007. He captured the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 23, and he was placed into a central storyline as the illegitimate son of Vince McMahon, one of the biggest angles the company could possibly offer a rising star at that time. His momentum seemed genuinely unstoppable heading into the following months. Then a painful sequence of setbacks began to unfold one after another. A misdiagnosed triceps tear forced WWE to strip him of his Money in the Bank briefcase, taking away his guaranteed championship opportunity in the process. When he finally returned from injury, he faced serious political heat from two of the biggest stars in the entire company, John Cena and Randy Orton, both of whom raised genuine concerns about his in-ring stiffness and general safety. Cena specifically pointed to an unsafe hip toss incident as the direct cause of a pectoral tear he suffered, and that accusation created a toxic political atmosphere around Kennedy backstage that never fully cleared. Steve Austin himself personally reached out to Anderson and advised him to leave the company so he could rebuild his standing somewhere else, away from that pressure. Kennedy waited instead of leaving right away, but he never truly recovered his political standing inside WWE after that. He was abruptly released in May 2009, following a botched drop spot that happened live on television. Mr. Kennedy's story shows how a single injury, combined with growing safety concerns from respected veterans in the locker room, can permanently damage a wrestler's standing backstage, no matter how promising his original push once looked on paper. What stands out most about Kennedy's fall is just how much support he had lost among the very people whose approval mattered most inside the company. Winning Money in the Bank at WrestleMania and being tied into a storyline with Vince McMahon's own family were both signs of enormous confidence from the top of the company. Yet none of that mattered once Cena and Orton, two of the most influential locker room voices at the time, raised concerns about working safely with him. Even a personal warning from a legend like Steve Austin, urging him to step away and rebuild elsewhere, was not enough to change his path in time. Number 4 is Nathan Jones. Late in 2002 and into early 2003, WWE heavily promoted Australian powerhouse Nathan Jones, under the memorable nickname the Colossus of Boggo Road. He was given a massive push alongside The Undertaker as WrestleMania 19 approached that spring, and management envisioned him as a future marquee attraction, built almost entirely around his imposing physical frame and intimidating presence. The real problem turned out to be experience, something no amount of size could replace. Jones had almost no professional wrestling background before joining the company, and he struggled badly to adapt to live television performance and the demanding travel schedule that comes with life inside WWE. Management eventually realized he could not safely handle a full-length, high-pressure live match at WrestleMania in front of a global audience. As a result, his WrestleMania 19 bout was altered at the very last minute into a handicap match instead, and Jones was kept backstage for most of the contest, rather than performing the bulk of it himself as originally planned. Overwhelmed by the sheer pressure and exhausted by relentless travel across the country, Jones quit the company shortly afterward without much warning. Nathan Jones's story is different from many of the others on this list, because there was no injury and no backstage feud to point toward. It was simply the enormous gap between an impressive physical look and the real skills needed to perform live in front of millions of people each week. That gap proved impossible to close quickly enough to save his push. His story is a useful reminder that a WrestleMania spot is not automatically a guarantee of a long career. Being placed alongside The Undertaker, one of the most respected performers in company history, was as strong a vote of confidence as a newcomer could receive. But wrestling live in front of a global pay-per-view audience is a completely different skill from looking imposing during a vignette or a backstage promo. Once WWE recognized that gap could not be closed safely in time, protecting Jones by limiting his in-ring role became the only realistic option left, even though it effectively ended his run before it had truly begun. The next stories on this list come from a different corner of the business entirely, one built around promo disconnects, valet storylines, and awkward booking traps. Career fall-offs can happen just as easily when a wrestler runs into a creative dilemma that has nothing to do with injury or crowd rejection, but everything to do with how a storyline is written around him. Sometimes an auxiliary performer standing beside a wrestler, whether a valet, a manager, or a tag team partner, ends up eclipsing the very star that character was meant to support. Other times, a company simply paints itself into a corner with its own booking, protecting one performer at the direct expense of another. The next two stories both show this pattern playing out in very different ways. Number 3 is Marc Mero. Marc Mero joined WWE in 1996 on a guaranteed contract, arriving with plenty of momentum after a genuinely successful run in WCW under the name Johnny B. Bad. He actually played an unwitting but historic role in wrestling history that same year, without ever intending to. During his King of the Ring 1996 semi-final match against Steve Austin, Mero accidentally kicked Austin in the mouth, busting his lip open and forcing him to get stitches at the hospital that night. That medical delay pushed Austin's post-match interview all the way to the very end of the broadcast, the moment when Austin delivered his legendary Austin 3:16 promo that changed his entire career. Not long after his own debut, Mero suffered a severe ACL injury that sidelined him for a considerable stretch of time. When he finally returned to the ring, he found that his real-life wife and on-screen valet, Sable, had become a massive pop culture phenomenon in her own right, far bigger than anyone had expected. Instead of building Mero back up as a genuine single star, WWE wrote him into a storyline as a jealous husband reacting bitterly to his wife's rising fame. That storyline stripped away his main event credibility rather than restoring it the way a comeback push should have. He was gradually moved into a comedic mid-card role over time, and he eventually left WWE in 1999 for good. Marc Mero's story shows how an injury combined with being overshadowed by someone else's rise, even someone on his own team standing right beside him, can quietly end a push that once looked genuinely promising. Sometimes the person standing closest to you becomes the very reason your own spotlight begins to fade away. There is a bittersweet irony sitting at the heart of Mero's story that fans still talk about today. The very same match where his career began to slip, the King of the Ring semi-final against Austin, accidentally helped create one of the most famous moments in wrestling history through the delayed interview that followed. Mero played a real part in wrestling lore without ever meaning to, while his own singles push slowly faded in the background. His guaranteed contract and his successful WCW run had promised a very different path, yet an ACL injury and his wife's unexpected rise to fame quietly rewrote the story WWE had originally planned for him. Number 2 is Ryback. In late 2012, Ryback built tremendous momentum around an undefeated winning streak and the crowd's "Feed Me More" chant, one of the most electric reactions anywhere in the company at that time. When an injury suddenly sidelined John Cena, WWE hastily accelerated Ryback straight into the main event, putting him directly against WWE champion CM Punk at Hell in a Cell 2012, with almost no preparation time. That rushed decision created a serious conflict happening behind the scenes. CM Punk was in the middle of a historic championship reign that had already lasted 134 days at that point, and he was firmly locked into a major showdown with The Rock planned for Royal Rumble 2013. That meant Ryback could not realistically win the title away from Punk, no matter how strong his momentum looked to the fans cheering him on. WWE protected Punk's reign by having referee Brad Maddox interfere directly in the match, handing Ryback his very first pay-per-view loss in front of a stunned crowd. A string of further pay-per-view losses followed soon after, and each one chipped away steadily at the aura of invincibility that had made Ryback so exciting to watch in the first place. On top of the frustrating booking problems, locker room complaints about unsafe ring work, and public disputes with management over pay added even more pressure onto his shoulders. Ryback's standing kept eroding steadily until he eventually departed from WWE altogether in 2016. Ryback's fall shows what happens when a booking trap collides directly with an unbeatable streak that fans had genuinely invested themselves in. No matter how loud the crowd chants for you, a push built entirely on being undefeated cannot survive being placed against a champion who is simply not allowed to lose under any circumstances. The Feed Me More chant had made Ryback one of the most organically over acts in the company during that period, proof that fans genuinely wanted to see him succeed on his own terms. That is exactly what makes the Hell in a Cell decision so costly in hindsight. An undefeated streak is a fragile kind of momentum, built entirely on the promise that it will never be broken. Once WWE placed him into a situation where losing was the only realistic outcome, given Punk's locked-in path toward The Rock, that fragile momentum could not survive the collision, and every loss that followed made it harder to rebuild the aura he once had. The final story on this list is different from every single one that came before it. It has nothing to do with crowd rejection, nothing to do with a locker room safety complaint, and nothing to do with an awkward booking trap involving another performer. Instead, it shows what happens when high-concept storytelling collides head-on with a real-world event, forcing a company to make an immediate and permanent decision out of pure corporate risk avoidance. Number 1 is Muhammad Hassan. Debuting in late 2004, Mark Kopani performed as Muhammad Hassan, an Arab-American character deliberately designed to expose post-9/11 prejudice and xenophobia present in America at that time. The character generated intense heel heat with fans almost immediately, and WWE pushed him directly into segments with some of the biggest icons in wrestling history, including Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker himself. He was even booked to win the World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam 2005, a clear sign of just how much confidence management genuinely had in him as a future star. Then, during a taped segment for SmackDown in July 2005, the storyline had Hassan orchestrate a violent assault on The Undertaker, carried out by masked associates dressed in disguise. Unknown to WWE at the time the segment was actually filmed, the London subway bombings happened on the very same day that episode aired on television. The broadcast of that unedited angle, arriving on the exact same day as a real terrorist attack overseas, drew immediate and severe condemnation from major media outlets and from executives at UPN, the network that carried WWE programming at the time. Under intense network pressure that followed almost instantly, WWE permanently pulled the character from television for good. Hassan was written off the show at the Great American Bash in 2005, and the 23-year-old performer was released from the company shortly afterward, ending his run entirely. Muhammad Hassan's story is the most sudden collapse on this entire list, arriving without warning of any kind. There was no slow decline, no gradual demotion, and no drawn-out locker room feud involved. A single unfortunate coincidence between a scripted storyline and a real-world tragedy ended a championship-level push almost overnight, proving that outside events beyond anyone's control can overwhelm even the strongest creative plans a company can build. Before that fateful broadcast, Hassan's rise had actually been one of the most successful pushes on this entire list, in terms of pure heat and reaction, showed just how much faith management had placed in the character's ability to draw genuine emotion from the audience. The problem was never a lack of talent or a lack of crowd reaction. The problem was timing in the truest sense. A scripted moment airing on the same day as a real tragedy overseas. Something no amount of planning inside a wrestling company could ever have predicted or prevented. 10 different wrestlers, 10 different paths to the top of the card, and 10 different ways that everything eventually fell apart. None of these men lacked genuine potential. Most of them had the size WWE looks for in a main eventer. Most of them had real talent inside the ring that fans could plainly see. Most of them were given real opportunities, sometimes bigger opportunities than almost anyone else in the company at that particular time. Lex Luger flew in by helicopter to body slam a giant. Ahmed Johnson captured a championship with pure explosive power. Mr. Kennedy held a guaranteed briefcase in his own hands. Muhammad Hassan was booked to become a world champion. Yet WWE history proves again and again that potential alone means absolutely nothing without the ability to adapt, without a genuine connection to the crowd, without good health, without good timing, and without surviving the politics that happen far away from the cameras that fans never get to see. Looking across all 10 stories, a few important truths keep repeating themselves. Crowds decide everything in the end, no matter how much money or promotion a company throws behind a performer. Momentum can disappear astonishingly quickly once fans stop believing in a character. For fans watching from home, these stories change the way a new push looks the very next time WWE decides to build one. A clean win over a legend or a guaranteed contract will always look exciting on television, but excitement alone has never been enough to guarantee a long career at the top of the card. Crowd connection, health, timing, and locker room trust all have to line up together, and history shows that alignment is rare. That is exactly why the wrestlers who managed to stay on top for years, rather than months, deserve to be remembered as something truly special within this business, and why the stories of the 10 men who could not quite hold on to that spot still matter so much to anyone trying to understand how this business truly works behind the scenes. Long after the television cameras have stopped rolling, and the arena lights have finally gone completely dark for the night, leaving only the memory